Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southern-appalachian-herbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southern-appalachian-herbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. This week I'm going to talk about an herb that I think we kind of take for granted. It's so commonly used, and it's really fairly easy to find in the wild or grow in your garden. It's one you have probably had experience with at some point in your life. Many of you going back to childhood. It's one of the first herbs most people ever come into contact with. But I think we really take it for granted. We're not mindful. We're not aware of all its qualities. And that herb is chamomile. Chamomile is actually a very powerful medicinal herb. It's easy to use. It's safe. It does a lot of things that are going to really surprise you. But as I was thinking about how often we just kind of overlook chamomile, we think of it as just um, a tea herb, an herb is not so much medicinal, but an herb we're going to find in the tea section in the grocery store. We don't think of it as a potent medicinal herb, which it really is. And it got me to thinking about mindfulness in general. I have a lot of friends who are military veterans, some of them special ops guys, and some of them have PTSD, and some of them have had a real tough time. And on that one end of the spectrum, when we think of mindfulness, these guys are on the extreme, you know? They're literally aware of their surroundings all the time because they train so hard to be aware of their surroundings and always to be on the lookout for a threat. And, I know a couple of them can't really go camping anymore. They can't really go hunting much anymore, especially if it means being out in the woods alone or spending a night in the woods, because they're so hyper aware and hyper vigilant of every sound. That is what we might call an unhealthy extreme in a time of peace. A little of it would certainly be a good lesson for all of us in our lives. We're not really aware of many of the threats around us. If you ever stop to think really how dangerous life is, it can be a little disturbing. Just this past week, near my home in the mountains of North Carolina, we have a big annual Highland Games. I mean, people come from all over the world, tons of Scots. I mean, they're up there playing bagpipes and throwing telephone poles around and eating haggis and having a big time. And one of the opening ceremonies is a marathon, a run. And one of the volunteers that was helping out was an older man. I think he was in his 80s. And he's pulling into the parking lot near where all the runners and their family members and friends are gathered and mistook the gas pedal for the brake pedal and ended up plowing into the crowd, injuring several people and killing somebody. Obviously he should have been a little more aware of his surroundings, a little more aware of where that gas pedal was. On the other hand, you think about all those people gathered there just having fun, ready for a run, totally unaware that their life was going to change in just a moment. I think also of like the assassination of Shinzo Abe in Japan this past week. There is so little violent crime, especially gun crime in Japan, that his security services, the police, whoever was in charge of looking out for him was just totally unaware that a man walked up with a homemade gun. You know, more evidence that gun control is not going to prevent a determined person from building and using a gun or other weapon. This guy got within 10 yards. He probably could have gotten close enough to use a knife. Knife crime is actually far more commonplace in countries that have strict gun control laws. You don't see a lot less violent crime. You just see people switch from guns to knives. When, talking about that culture in particular, there are many cultures that just basically don't have a lot of crime in the first place. And it doesn't matter if guns are legal or not, they just don't have a lot of crime. America has a lot of crime, and we don't really think about what's going on around us all the time. I mean, how many times have you been driving down the road and somebody in another vehicle is drunk or high? I mean, I've been run off the road a couple of times by intoxicated people. Thank God I was never killed. Uh, just a few months ago in North Carolina, there was a family driving down the interstate, and somebody in another vehicle just opened fire on their car. Apparently, the guy thought they'd cut him off. This is a family on vacation, probably not really paying attention to what they were doing. And the guy decides that this person intentionally cut him off, or maybe he didn't care if it was intentional or not, and just opened fire into a car full of a parent and two or three kids and killed the mother. Just right on the interstate, driving through Robeson County, Lumberton area of North Carolina. Such as that is random, but a little more awareness, I assume, had the driver noticed, been more aware of what his actions were doing to affect another person, or that maybe there was someone near him driving a little more erratically than one would expect, he could have slowed down and let him go on, or sped up and gotten away from him. A lot of times people ask me, what is the most important aspect really of becoming an herbalist or of foraging or of hunting or of wildcrafting or fishing and a lot of the things that I do. And I have to say, in all honesty, um, you have to learn a lot. You have to dedicate yourself to learning a subject, but especially when you're in the woods, it's mindfulness. I mean, I even myself am amazed that I walk through a patch of woods and I don't really see anything. Maybe I'm listening to the birds or I'm looking at the trees, and I see something over, maybe on a ridge that catches my eye, and I walk over there and I turn around and suddenly there are morel mushrooms all around me. You can look for certain trees that will indicate that will help you find morel mushrooms. You can know that the morel mushrooms are growing about the time the May apples are coming up, but unless you are mindful of what these little, dark little tree-looking mushrooms are that are close to the ground, you'll walk right on them and not even see them. You have to be mindful to see those mushrooms. Sometimes they'll be bright yellow and orange chicken of the woods mushrooms, and I don't see them until I've seen one. One of them catches my eye. I walk over and I pick it and I start looking around, and suddenly I'm surrounded by bright orange, like you would think they would just stand out like traffic cones. They're that bright, chicken of the woods mushrooms. But until you're mindful of what you're looking for, you don't see it. When if I go out in the springtime, early summer, about right now, and I'm looking for ragweed to add to my allergy tincture, I don't see the ragweed all around me really until I've seen the first couple plants, and then suddenly I'm seeing ragweed everywhere. That's mindfulness. Uh, it's a stark contrast to like not too long ago. I'm in the grocery store and I'm standing in an aisle and I was looking at a product, and a young lady on her smartphone just ran straight into me, just walked right into me, bounced off my chest and fell on the ground, totally unaware of her surroundings. See this all the time. I see men and women doing it. I'm not just trying to pick on the women. I see people having minor traffic accidents, backing into cars in the parking lot, walking through a public space, whether it's a crowded street or like a crowd at Walmart, and they're on their phones and they're not paying a bit of attention to what's around them. That is, well, for one, it's incredibly dangerous. Like I said, you don't know who around you. I mean, one reason I'm a fan of face tattoos is it tells me who's been in prison. Face tattoos, yeah, they're getting a little more popular among the general populace, but just like, pants on the ground, not wearing a belt, and no shoelaces, face tattoos have long been part of prison culture. And when I see someone that has face tattoos, like, say, the shooter that just took out a bunch of people at the 4th of July parade in Illinois, who has face tattoos, I look at that person and say, okay, I'm avoiding that person. Now, maybe a nice person, maybe I'm making a snap judgment, but if I see someone and I look at them and I think, that person looks like a gang member, that person looks like they've been in prison doing hard time, that person looks dangerous. For instance, just the other day, I was in line. I was passing through a town. I stopped in a grocery store just to pick up a few things, on my way. And there was a guy, maybe 65 years old, in line, and I noticed he had a way about him that was a little intimidating. And I noticed the cashier seemed absolutely terrified of him. And when I got up there, swastika on the back of his neck, another indication of how many people he had killed tattooed on the side of his neck. And yeah, this is somebody who had served some hard time for murder and, Aryan Nation and what the heck's he doing out on the streets. That's a sign to stay away from people like that. Maybe he's totally reformed. Maybe he became a Christian in prison. Who knows? But he still had a very intimidating, scary manner about him, and it was felt by all around. Now, if someone had been in there on their cell phone, they could have. What if that girl had run into him and bounced off and hit the ground? You'd have no idea how somebody like that would have reacted, or especially a younger guy, a younger. I mean, I've interacted with a lot of gang members, white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter, just because of where I grew up, and a lot of times they are looking for a fight. That's why they have the music so loud. They want someone to say something to them. You got to be aware of your surroundings. So when you're in the woods, be aware of the birds, the trees, the deer. You want to be a good hunter, sit down and stop and listen for a while. You know, sit down and stop because that deer hears you in the woods. Be aware of the wind, be aware of the breeze, be aware of how it's carrying your scent through the woods. If you want to be a good herbalist and wildcrafter, stop and look at, say, 10 square feet or even square feet around your feet and look for those herbs. Once you see one, look a few feet and you'll see more and more. That's mindfulness and it's training your eye. And I think it's not only important when you're in the woods, when you're trying to be an herbalist, when you're learning to wildcraft, but if you're, say, a clinical herbalist or you're trying to treat your own health or you're trying to advise someone, that mindfulness helps you to understand what's going on. I mean, how many times have you heard someone who was like really sick? I mean, maybe they've even contracted a terminal cancer, and they're thinking back, I saw the warning signs for years and I'd ignored them. I knew something was wrong, but I kept working and I ignored them. That mindfulness of those problems would have led that person to an earlier treatment. Mindfulness of another's problems is absolutely essential for a clinical herbalist. And mindfulness of your surroundings could save your life in many instances. So I just wanted to just broach that subject just a little bit. We just take far too many things for granted. There's a concept called normalcy bias that is essential for mental health, actually. It is how we learn to feel secure in the world. It's sort of what my friends who have PTSD have lost. Normalcy bias tells us that tomorrow is going to be like today, which was like yesterday. If we were safe today, we're probably going to be safe tomorrow. It can be a very dangerous thing because it can allow threats to build and go unnoticed, go ignored. My friend who was killed in Ukraine, I kept saying, you need to get out of Ukraine. You need to get your family out of Ukraine. I will help you in any way I can. Just get out. And she said, the Russians come and go. Their soldiers are rude to women, but they don't cause much damage. I'm not worried about it. Next thing you know, her city's been bombed into dust, and she and her family are dead. Normalcy bias did not warn her to get out in time. Normalcy bias in our economy says that things are going to be okay. We have upturns and downturns. What if things aren't okay? That's all part of the prepper mindset, homesteader mindset, resilience mindset. And yes, it really is very much a part of herbal medicine. And it's a serious topic. And I know I like to keep this podcast kind of lighthearted and everything, but it was pretty stark when I went to church just recently, seeing people, young people, maybe up into their 40s, totally unaware of their surroundings. They were not hearing the homily. They were not interacting with the people around them. A lot of the younger ones whose parents were not disciplining them were totally focused on their phones. I'm not even sure why they were in church. Young families that were so focused on each other and their kids, completely unaware of their surroundings, the problems the kids may have been causing for older people, um, leaving toys in the aisle that somebody could trip over, different things like that, or, a potential threat that could be in the parking lot. They're just so not tuned in. And I think when I come from the woods into town, I am very aware of this. And really, if I had to say the one thing that people seem to be focused on to their detriment, to that point of not interacting and being aware of their environment, it's interpersonal conflicts. It used to be I'd see mainly women do this, but now it's men and women, all teenagers. Okay, first of all teenagers and like through college years. But I am seeing, 30 and 40-year-old guys walking along on their phone, talking out loud so the whole world can hear them, arguing with people or complaining about something somebody said that hurt their feelings. I mean, like they're a 13-year-old girl. I hate to put it in that blunt terms, but if you've ever been around teenage girls, like think back about when you're in high school, all they do is complain about, so and so said this and so did this. And can you believe someone said that about me? Or can you believe someone said that about my friend? I am hearing this constantly from teenagers, women, and men, grown men on their phones complaining about something somebody said at work, something someone in their family said, and totally unaware of their surroundings. And that to me is incomprehensible. There are two primary roles that a man has: protect and provide for. Protect his family and provide for his family. He's a utilitarian in that sense. And when he's on the phone complaining about Bob said something that hurt his feelings, he's not doing either of those two things. I don't know how we've gotten to this point in this society. Uh, some people need a real slap in the head with reality, and I'm afraid they're going to get it before it's too late. They're going to be driving down the interstate and inadvertently cut somebody off, and somebody's going to be shooting into their car. Or they're going to bump into the wrong guy in line at the grocery store or a Walmart parking lot. And another thing, all that focused on interpersonal relationships, on interpersonal conflict especially, is the main reason people don't accomplish the things in their life that they want to accomplish. They're so focused on the minutia and constantly running those conversations through their heads, even when they're not talking to another person, that they don't do the important things in life. This interpersonal conflict minutia is incredibly destructive. I mean, how many times have you been upset about something? Maybe rightly so, justifiably so, not about a little thing. And you think, I'm going to go take a walk to clear my head. You walk a mile or two, and then you realize you don't even remember where you've been. You didn't see anything around you. This is what people are experiencing on a daily basis on little things. And yeah, no wonder they don't notice their kid turning into a monster that's going to be a school shooter. They're not focused on their kid. No wonder they don't start a business, become a successful business owner, or if they do, their business doesn't succeed or they don't get that promotion at work. They're not doing the work they're supposed to be doing because they're so focused on something somebody said that upset their wife, and now their wife's upset about that. And there's going to be conflict. I think Rex Stout's Neurowolf said it wonderfully. Whenever we interact with our fellow human beings, we put ourselves at risk. That's incredibly true. Any way you want to look at it, the more people you have in your lives, the more interpersonal relationships, the more interpersonal conflicts there's going to be. But also, you really got to put that stuff out of your mind if you're going to accomplish much. People say, how do you write all these books? How do you do so much in a day? The truth of it is, I live a pretty peaceful life in a very rural area without a lot of interpersonal conflict. And I always say about my neighbors, the people around me, people make their own trouble because I see, people getting married and divorced 3 or 4 times, and they've got drug problems, and they got drinking problems, and somebody's beating their spouse, and their kids are getting into trouble and going to jail and all that. And me, I'm just sitting over here, going about my day, peaceful, getting everything done, checking things off one thing at a time, staying focused on what I got to do. And I'm by no means anybody's hero. I mean, I'm not saying you need to live as a hermit in the woods or whatever, but just keeping everything in context goes a long way. I heard a guy say, first kid, they freaked out about everything. By the second or third kid, they weren't freaking out about anything, right? It was his motto was, is the kid alive? Did what he did it hurt somebody else? Is the dog okay? Is the house burning down okay? If none of that's happening, if all that's okay, then it's probably not a big deal, right? So keeping everything in context. So when we go out in the woods and we're going to wildcraft, be mindful of our surroundings. When we go to a store, when we're around people, be at least aware enough of your surroundings that you don't get yourself into unnecessary trouble. And when it comes to just life in general, laying some of that down, just say a prayer about it and move on, is going to make you a much happier person. You're probably going to sleep a lot better and you're going to get a whole lot more done. The Benedictine motto is ora et labora, pray and work. That's how the Benedictines essentially Christianized all of Europe. Pray and work. You get all those interpersonal squabbles among those monks, they probably wouldn't have gotten very far out of out of Rome. So anyway, now let's move on to an herb that we often just don't pay enough attention to. Let's be mindful of all the many uses of chamomile. Now, first of all, there are two varieties of chamomile. There's Roman chamomile and there's German chamomile. The Roman has also been called in history English chamomile or garden chamomile. To some extent, let's say about 90 to 95%, these herbs can be used interchangeably. Chamomile is a pretty white flower with a big button-shaped yellow cone in the center. That's the first thing you look for in identifying chamomile. And this has been such a popular garden herb. You will find it has escaped from people's gardens over the centuries, and you may find it really just about anywhere. The well, I guess probably the two most prominent uses for chamomile are the two you're probably familiar with. Chamomile is a bitter herb that helps settle the stomach, often used for children with upset stomachs. I mean, colicky babies on up to, that's most people's first experience with chamomile because it's not only soothing to the stomach and digestion and calming to the stomach, but it's a mild sedative. This has been, the household remedy, the grandmother's remedy for calming a fussy child for centuries, for millennia, actually. It's, but chamomile is also a useful sedative for adults. It can just help calm you and help you get a little bit of sleep. It's far more effective for children because, their systems just haven't developed as much. The chamomile acts more strongly on children, especially because they haven't been exposed to other sedative herbs or to stimulants. I mean, if you think about it, these kids aren't drinking coffee. You know, hopefully they're not drinking Coke and Pepsi and all that garbage. But many adults, especially if they use chamomile, if chamomile was used on them a lot as a child, and can find chamomile more effective than others because it triggers that memory. It triggers a scent memory, especially, and the brain just kind of remembers, oh, this herb calms me down. I mean, it really is that simple. It's not a placebo effect. It's actually a scent memory. And if you've only had store brand teas, chamomile teas, like Celestial Seasons or whatever, you may be surprised to find out just what a strong scent chamomile has. It actually smells, the blossoms smell, as long as they're not stale, fresh, dried, but not stale, like apples, green apples. And the Latin name of chamomile actually relates to um, I think it goes to actually back to the Greek name meaning ground apple, because when you would walk across it, you got this nice smell of apples, and it's really a wonderful herb. And some people like to use it in potpourris as such as well, because when those flowers, even dried, are nice and fresh, it is one of the best smelling herbs in the herbal medicine cabinet. And that's how you know you got good chamomile. It just smells really nice. And if it doesn't have a smell, it's lost almost all its medicinal use. Going back to those ancient Greeks, Dioscorides wrote extensively on chamomile under the name of Anthemus, and he identified three specific types of chamomile. He said it grew in rough places and byways, which is still where it grows today. Occasionally you'll find it in mountain meadows and such, but it is a nice weedy wildflower. He said taken as a drink, as a decoction, meaning a tea essentially, or even by bathing in a decoction, it would expel the menstrual flow. It would bring on menses. It would expel stones, urinary and kidney stones, induce urine. He warned it could cause a miscarriage. That most people would not think of chamomile as being that strong these days, and that's honestly because a lot of times we get stale chamomile if we use chamomile at all. He said taken as a drink, it was good for gaseousness, essentially, flatulence and indigestion. Those suffering from intestinal obstruction, he's recommended for jaundice. Remember, I said this is a good bitter herb. It's very good for the liver. It's an excellent liver herb, and few people even know that about chamomile today, even though that's one of its primary historical uses. And he used it as a compress, the hot decoction as a compress placed over the bladder for bladder issues, as well as taking it internally. He said it could be useful to cure thrush in children, and it was good for recurrent fevers. Another use that we just really don't use chamomile much for anymore. We overlook this herb. By the, let's just say late 1000s, as the Greek and Roman medicine had become the monastic medicine of the Middle Ages, St. Hildegard von Bingen uh, recommended German chamomile. She said it has a hot and pleasant juice and is like an ointment for painful intestines. If one has pain in the intestines, he should cook German chamomile with water and lard or oil. He should add fine whole wheat flour and make a porridge. He should eat it, and it will heal his intestines. When women menstruate, they should eat or drink that same porridge. It will gently provide a purgation of mucus and internal fetid matter and bring on menses. However, a person who suffers from a stitch in the side, we talked about the stitch in the side, I guess it was last week. That's, that pain you get in your side when running can also be caused from inflamed lungs or an inflamed liver, or a lot of gas on the stomach, actually. Anything that's putting kind of pressure in that area and constricting to some extent breathing can cause a stitch in the side. Oftentimes, an asthma attack will bring on a stitch in the side, just like running would, and it's because the lungs are working to pull in more air. And she said for the stitch aside, one should mix the juice of German chamomile with cow butter, and he should rub the area which hurts, and it will be cured. Now, speaking of our talk last week on centaury, I was confused by what the herbalist Gerard said in the 1500s. He recommended centaury, another bitter herb, for what he called the green sickness. And I speculated as to what the green sickness might be, and I was quite wrong. Because he had said it could be used for infected wounds. I thought, well, perhaps the green sickness was gangrene. No, it turns out, according to my herbalist friend Tori Lee, who you may remember I interviewed about homeopathy about a year ago, she got in touch and said, actually, the green sickness is basically a form of anemia that was rather common in earlier times, especially among young girls as they reach puberty. So, just wanted to clear that up. And now let's see what Father Nape said about chamomile in German folk medicine, well, circa 1800, late 1800s. He said chamomile tea used for colds, catarrhs, that's congestion, especially when they are attended by fever, for stomach pains, cramps, violent congestion, toothaches. He recommended for toothache, which is a really unique use, is a well-known and trusted friend in every German house. Less familiar to the English public will probably be the little muslin bags filled with dried chamomile flowers, which will relieve pain when applied warm on the stomach or abdomen. Well, isn't that interesting? Remember, we just talked about how the Ascorides, 2,000 years previously, 2,000 years prior, had recommended compresses of a tea made of chamomile for bladder issues. Father Nape, 1800s, recommending little pouches used as a compress for pains in the stomach or abdomen. His protege, Brother Aloysius, said it relieves cramps and it's one of the best remedies for colic, stomach cramps, and swellings from wind, this gas. It is also recommended for indigestion, heavy bleeding, liver complaints, and for the nerves. See, it's a nervine, it's a sedative. For hysteria, for kidney and bladder stones, and dropsy, which is edema. When applied externally in the form of warm bags, chamomile relieves cramps, inflammations, etc. Burns should be constantly bathed with the decoction. And later in the German tradition of folk medicine, 1970s, Maria Trebin wrote at great length about chamomile. And she said, it is no exaggeration that I cite chamomile as a cure-all, especially for babies. In any case, the child should be given chamomile tea if it suffers from cramps and stomach aches. He is of help with flatulence, diarrhea, eruptions, stomach troubles, and gastritis, in menstrual disorders, cessation of menstrual flow, and all abdominal disorders, insomnia, inflammation of the testicles, fevers, wounds, and toothaches. Chamomile produces perspiration and is soothing and antispasmodic. It is antiseptic and anti-inflammatory, especially in cases of inflammation of the mucous membranes. Externally, chamomile is used as a compress and wash for inflamed eyes, conjunctivitis, moist and itching eruptions, wounds, and as a gargle for toothache. Anyone who starts feeling aggravated should drink a cup of chamomile tea, and soon the wonderfully soothing and sedative effect is felt. Very much recommended is a warm chamomile pillow applied to aching parts. Chamomile baths and washings are much beneficial to the whole nervous system. After a severe illness or states of exhaustion, it is soothing and its quieting effects are soon felt. Even as a beauty aid, she said, chamomile has its merit. The face washed with a decoction of chamomile once a week will soon show a healthier and softer glow. A decoction of it is used as a hair conditioner, and in our modern time, you often see chamomile in certain herbal hair shampoos and conditioners. She said it was especially good for blonde hair and makes it manageable and gives it a beautiful shine. See, this is the tea herb that we have so often taken for granted, good for, as she said, almost a cure-all. She went on and recommended it for hemorrhoids, colds, sinusitis, She mentions that it was one of the most popular herbs among the ancient Egyptians, and they dedicate it to the sun god because of its fever reducing effects, and also used as a rub for neuralgia and rheumatic or arthritic pain. The Interestingly, she also mentions the story that Father Kunzel, who I wrote about with Jolanta Whitted in our book, The Herbs and Weeds of Father Kunzel, gives a really entertaining story of a woman in his village who was actually known as the Chamomile Witch. She used chamomile as a cure for everybody that came to her, and they all seemed to benefit from it. That's how intensely ingrained chamomile was in the Swiss culture in the early 1900s. She even used chamomile as a decoction and a rub, I think also in an oil, for paralysis, for people who had suffered from strokes, for severe arthritis. Um, People came to her from all over, apparently, and were greatly benefited by the one herb she seemed to use, at least so much more than anything else. She was literally known as the chamomile witch. That's high praise from a very conservative, very orthodox Catholic priest who would have always been on the lookout for superstition and witchcraft. In the English tradition, we'll go back to Gerard, who confused me so badly last week. He said, of course, that chamomile is good against colic. I mean, that is like the primary use we still use it for today, colicky babies, but also against the kidney and bladder stones. Oil of chamomile he used again said he recommended oil of chamomile as being exceedingly good for all matter of aches, pains, bruising, shrinking of sinews, hardness, and cold swelling. So there we have, two countries as far apart as England and Switzerland, as in two times about 400 years apart, where both the herbalist Gerard, a contemporary of Shakespeare, was using chamomile for the same purpose as the chamomile witch as described by Father Kunzel. He recommended a decoction of chamomile in wine, good against coldness in the stomach, sour belchings, basically, you know, indigestion problems. He mentions that the Egyptians used it again for colds and fevers, agues as they called it back then. He also recommended it as an herb used in ale, and chamomile does have a long history as an herb, a bittering agent in beer, used much like hops. He said it would easeth the pain of the chest, the coming of wind, and expelleth the tough and clammy phlegm. So he thought it was good to both settle the stomach, get rid of bloating and gas, and cleanse phlegm and congestion. And he said that that beer, which was commonly given to children in Gerard's time, everyone drank beer because the water was no good. So children were commonly given beer, just as adults were. But he said that this beer infused with chamomile was particularly good to help fevers in children. And added to baths, it would help the skin, it would open pores, it helped with cramps and gripings of the belly, pains of the side, softened hard swellings, and he said it was just really good mixed with all things that are good and applied to mitigate pain. So he had a great many uses for it. Culpeper, about 100 years or so later, also said that chamomile taketh away the pains and stitches of the side. He recommended against agues, of course, which were fevers. And he said that being anointed with an oil made from the flowers, from the crowns of the head to the sole of the feet. You'd have to have a lot of the oil to do that. But he said it would cause a sweat if you got in bed and covered up. That would help with the fevers, the agues, the malarial fevers that were such a problem at that time. He said it was good for the liver and the spleen. And a tea of it, he said, would actually take away weariness. We think of it as being more of a sedative that makes you tired, but also would ease pains of the body wherever the tea was applied. Much later on in the British tradition of herbal medicine, Miss Grieve, writing in, I guess, 1930, 1931, in a modern herbal, she had quite a bit to say about chamomile. I'm not going to read maybe just a couple little little portions here. She quoted a poem from the Middle Ages that read, "Like a chamomile bed, the more it is trodden, the more it will spread." She said in the olden days, chamomile was looked down as a plant's physician. And this is kind of interesting because she's quoting, well, she's citing sources that were talking about how chamomile seemed to heal other plants that it was planted near. And, companion planting is art and science. Louise Riotti wrote a lot about this. And what was her book? Roses Love Basil? Roses Love Garlic. I can't remember. It's not at my fingertips, but she wrote two books on companion planting, but also this power of, I guess we would say, of chamomile to make other plants stronger, to heal diseases in other plants, was well known and is still used today by the biodynamic gardeners who use a lot of, well, what would we say? Um, Quasi-mystical uses of herbs in their gardening, which actually have a lot of foundation in practical soil science and health. They make subtle changes essentially in the fungal and bacterial states of the soil. And of course, she lists all the uses of chamomile that we've already discussed, and gives quite a bit of its history and where it was grown and why it was popular in certain areas, throughout Europe up to her time. More modern uses of chamomile, if we look to Plants for a Future, which is a great resource, says medicinal uses of German chamomile. German chamomile is a well-known herbal remedy and is much used in the West. It is particularly an excellent herb for treating various digestive disorders, nervous tension, and irritability, and also when used externally to treat skin problems. An infusion of the flowers is taken internally as an anodyne, anti-inflammatory, antiseptic, antispasmodic, carminative, cholagogue, diaphoretic, emmenagogue, febrifuge, sedative, stomatic, tonic, and vasodilator. An infusion is particularly useful as a stomatic, nervine, and sedative for young children, especially when they are teething. It is also used in the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, peptic ulcers, hiatal hernia. In large doses or when taken regularly for several times each day, the tea can become emetic and also cause the symptoms it is intended to cure. It means it can make you throw up and it can actually cause indigestion, stomach upset, and all that, so don't use too much of it. Flowers are also used externally to treat wounds, sunburns, hemorrhoids, mastitis, and leg ulcers. And it talks about when you should pick the flowers and how you should store the flowers and all that. And then it also talks of the Roman chamomile. So it's a common herb with a long history of safe and effective medical use. It is widely used as a household remedy. It's particularly useful as a remedy for various problems of the digestive system, as a sedative and a nervine, especially suited for young children. A tea made from the flowers should be prepared in a closed vessel to prevent the loss of essential oils. Flowers are anodyne, anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, nervine, stomatic, tonic, vasodilator, etc. So you can see they're very interchangeable, but the German chamomile seems to be a little stronger. So there you have just myriad uses. Like Ms. Trevin said, chamomile it's essentially a cure-all. It's one of the most essential herbs that we should have in our herbal medicine cabinet of dried herbs and herbs prepared as tinctures and oils and all that. We should have it as our tea cupboard to make herbal teas, and we should have it growing in our gardens. Chamomile is incredibly easy to grow. Like that poem Miss Grieve quoted, the more it's trod, the more it spreads, whatever that was. It's a weedy plant. It can grow in poor soil. It can grow in poor conditions. I found it doesn't really like wet feet. It doesn't like to be planted in very wet soil. But a poor soil, a dry soil, just regular garden soil really is just fine. It's a tough plant. It grows quickly. You could probably even plant some right now and get it going, grow it in time to harvest it before the fall. And this is, we're heading into mid July. So go, Get some chamomile seeds, get it growing, learn to identify this plant. It's a pretty sunny plant. It's going to look good in your landscaping. I don't care if you're in a homeowners association or whatever. You're going to be able to grow this one as an ornamental that you can also use. And the scent is just wonderful. It's probably, it would be a toss up between chamomile and wild roses as to what my favorite flower scent is. But as I love food so much, and chamomile is so stimulating to the appetite. I think I might actually say chamomile because that scent, that green apple, that fresh apple scent, it's not only pleasant, but it really kind of gets my mouth watering. So, y'all have a great week. Remember, just be mindful of what's around you when all these memories, especially I see so many people that have trouble remembering things people have done to them in the past that slighted them, remembering conversations that have upset them, remembering times they were embarrassed or hurt or whatever. Those memories come to dominate their lives to the point that they can't even experience the present, much less think about the future. Other people think about the future so much that they can't experience the present or learn the lessons from the past. And all those interpersonal squabbles. I mean, bottom line is, as someone who doesn't have a lot of family or wife and children, a lot of friends nearby, a lot of people in my life that I love, I am going to give the advice that I don't have much opportunity to use myself, but I wish I did, and I hope to one day in the future. And you may call me a critic, a hypocrite. You might say, as Jesus said, "Physician, heal thyself." If you love the people in your life, forgive them, lay down whatever they said that upset you. Don't hold a grudge, and just get on enjoying having them in your life because they'll be gone all too soon. They'll be gone all too soon. All right, y'all. Have a great week. I'll see you next time. Don't forget, please buy my books. They're all on Amazon, or you can order them directly from me. As the Bible says, this is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So rejoice, be glad, have a good meal, be healthy, and just lay those burdens down. Just lay them down and experience the things that really matter. So have a good one. I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.